So today
we're reviewing
Jungle Cruise.
Based on Disneyland's theme park ride, where a small riverboat takes a group of travelers through a jungle filled with dangerous animals and reptiles, but with a supernatural element. So we saw Jungle Cruise about a week ago, and it was a movie that I wasn't super excited about. I was interested in this movie because I love the ride at Disney World. And this says it's Disneyland's theme park ride, but it is at Disney World. It's probably at Disneyland, too. We do have guest star Barry here today, Mountain Warriors, White Whale. But what were your initial thoughts, Jake, of this movie?
I mean, like you just said, I wasn't very excited going to the movie. I wanted to see what their spin was on it, because obviously I've ridden that ride at Magic Kingdom probably over 50 times. I wouldn't say I love the ride, but I always feel like it's a ride that you have to do at least once each trip. And I liked, just kind of vaguely giving my opinion on it. I liked certain aspects of the movie, and there were some cool, there's just comments that you would know if you rode the ride. And I say walking out of the theater, I enjoyed parts of it. And I do think it was above average, but there were some problems I had with it too.
What were your initial thoughts of Jungle Cruise?
Jungle Cruise for me was, I actually liked it. And it was actually much better than I thought it was going to be. I think because I'm okay with the ride at Disney in Florida. I guess I've done it enough to where, to me, most of the workers, nothing against them personally, but a lot of them just kind of make the ride not as fun. They're not as comical. They don't seem as into their job. So I do enjoy the fantasy part of that ride, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. It's very much in the middle, if not towards the bottom. So I thought the movie was actually a pleasant surprise, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, this movie, I walked out of this movie disappointed. And I know I'm a little different from your opinion. I think that there's some things to like about it. There is, but there's just a lot of things that bother me. And as someone who loves the ride and has so many memories as a kid growing up on this ride, they needed to follow things to this ride to please me at least. And they do some things, but there's just a lot that bothers me. There is a lot to like though. Okay, there is some to like, and so I have some positives, but why don't we get into our positives of Jungle Cruise?
I think the positives are just the setting. I'm always a fan of movies that are in like jungles and like nature that involve a lot of like animals, and I think this movie did a lot of good things with animals. There were some issues I had with some of the special effects and some scenes, but the majority of it I think worked. And obviously the cast I think carried the film, from The Rock obviously being great in every single movie he's in for the most part. Emily Blunt did a great job. The villain, there's two villains. The main villain,
Melons.
yeah, the main one, the kind of like
This guy,
the Nazi, what country was he from? The German.
yeah,
the German guy. He was probably he probably stole the film.
he was a great villain.
At one point, he really stole it with his I like the way that he played that character, and I think the storyline was okay. The storyline was one of the issues I'll get into later.
He's up there with the Jurassic World villain.
Well, he's not. They definitely did not give him enough coin, but there was definitely a lot of funny moments, and I liked a lot of the references to the ride as well.
What are your main positives?
I mean, positive-wise, the fantasy part of it is fun, and I thought it was enjoyable. One of my favorite characters is The Rock. I've enjoyed most of the movies he's in. And so I think that was a good basis for me. And like Jake said, a lot of the nature things involved, I really enjoy that aspect of it. And I wasn't as dialed into the comparisons between the ride and the movie itself. I compared this movie more to like movies like The Mummy from 1999, which I really enjoyed that one. So there was certain parts of that seemed to resemble that movie. And overall, like I said, I thought the positives were, a lot of good natured Disney things, which, I love Disney. So I think it's a lot of good fantasy stuff.
Yeah, the main positives for me is the actors, the acting. The Rock and Emily Blunt were really good and perfectly casted for their roles. I think the visual effects were good, and there were some interesting aspects. Like, I don't want to spoil anything, but as far as how they utilize the river and the made up stuff, because there's a lot of natural or supernatural elements, I thought there were some interesting things they went into there. And so I think the main actors were good. There were some good visual effects. and interesting concepts in this movie, and that, for the most part, that's my positives.
I mean, branching off what Barry said about just how, like, mentioning the Mummy, it definitely followed that storyline in some ways by having the experienced guy in The Rock playing almost like the Brendan Fraser character, and you have Emily Blunt and her brother, similar to Evie and Jonathan. So there's, like, obviously a lot of relations there. Obviously, it's different stories, but I definitely enjoyed that aspect of it, and for the most part, I loved their interactions on camera. Almost anytime they were on camera, I was invested for the most part with them.
Oh, true. And the villain, the biggest positive for me, I almost forgot, was the villain.
Yeah,
This
I
guy
can't
right
forget
here.
about that.
Big positive. And then why don't we get into our negatives?
For me, just the story was fine, but it was also, it seemed like a lot more. It just went a lot deeper, I think, with the story than I thought it really needed to. It really did not need this huge storyline going behind it with this tree with these flowers that gave like eternal life. It would heal anything, and I think there was a lot going into the storyline to think about. And then really I think the special effects, like I said, were great for the most part. The only thing the thing that kind of just jumped out at me when watching the movie was that there's one animal in particular that's on screen a lot, that when you've watched a lot of movies in Disney and just film overall, our special effects should be a lot better at this point. In Jungle Book, for example, with the Black Panther, Bagheera, like, I expect a lot more from the special effects. So when I see something on camera and it doesn't look real at all, it's kind of tough to kind of look away from. And that's not that big of a flaw for me. But there's also some stuff that, as far as like mistreating the ride, in my mind, there's a lot of great references, but they totally screw over one aspect of the ride that
A big part.
a couple of aspects to the ride was hard for me to get to look past. The movie didn't overwhelm me with great stuff, but it also didn't. It was, for me. It was a mixed bag with certain things, and I like I said, I think it's above average. But I felt like I was very, during the film, I felt a little, I don't know, I must have been tired that day, but I just felt a little like bored at times. But there's a lot of great moments though.
What were your negatives for the film?
Well, before I go into really, I don't have a lot of negatives. I have one in particular I'm going to bring up here in a minute. Another positive is I got to go to this movie with my sons, which I really enjoy that. And I love, for what it's worth, I enjoy being on Movie Mania. I believe it's a very popular site here. My negative, which I said, I really like the movie. I'll give a rating later. I think it's going to be higher than The Boys. Not having crocodiles in it, for what it's worth. I think, the Amazon has crocodiles. And this is a fantasy movie, so you could have even thrown real hippos into it if you wanted to. They did at least reference that with a fake one, which, I think was the closest resembled to the ride itself, outside of The Rock actually being funny. Now, if I went on the ride with The Rock at Disney, I would think that would be one of the best rides in the park. But other than that, negative-wise, I guess just crocodiles alone not being in it.
That is something interesting. Just crocodiles are kind of an iconic part of the ride, and you think the Nile River, there would be crocodiles. My main negatives come from the main point of the ride. The ride is pretty simple. You ride through the river, and there's animals, there's crocodiles, hippos, and then there's tribes. And there's mainly these head-shrinking tribes. That is something that happens. It's true. There are tribes out there that literally capture people and shrink their heads, and it's a really crazy thing. But it's always the ride where you're on the ride and they tell you to get down and they're shooting things at you. They do something with the main thing in the ride with the tribe. I mean, a big point of the ride, they changed that. That peed me off. And I think that in this movie was a little too long. I thought it was too long, in my opinion. That's probably the biggest negatives for me.
Yeah, I think the word I forgot to say was pacing. Like the last few movies I've seen, and the pacing's not been an issue. And this one, the pacing just, something was off about it. I don't know what it actually was, but when I'm not checking like time and like how long it's been, but I was feeling that a little bit at times of this movie. And I think the point about animals was there was great animal scenes, but when you think about it, animals, I thought should have been utilized more. And I was hoping this is like an adventure through a jungle and having to kind of combat the wildlife, not like kill anything per se, but just be constantly getting away from wildlife. And the villains in this film were cool at times, but at the same time, not what I was really hoping for. I was hoping for like more of an animal journey. I mean, it's a jungle cruise, and that's what you think about when doing this ride is all the animals you pass. And I just think it was just not enough animals for me as far as like being at the forefront of the movie.
What are your final thoughts and score of Jungle Cruise?
Like I said, it's above average for me. It definitely, there's a lot to like about it, and the cast that once again carried the film with The Rock having a great performance, and just a lot of good comedic moments. And for me, like I said, my average 5 for me is above average. No, 5 is average, so anything above 5 is above average. So I think for right now I'm leaning towards I think just for how I feel about the film, I think I have to just give it like a 6.5 out of 10. It's definitely above average. It's not below average, and I think it's a solid 6.5 out of 10.
What was your final thoughts and score?
Final thoughts, again, it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. It's a nice break from reality to go enjoy a movie like this. I would rate it, number-wise, I would probably go 8 out of 10. Maybe 8.5, but at least 8 out of 10. Like Jake said, I really enjoy the character of The Rock. I thought the other characters did a very good job of, complimenting the movie. It's an enjoyable movie. I hadn't been to a movie in a long time. And so, again, I enjoyed the movie more than the ride. I'll go 8 out of 10.
Yeah, so as someone who's a big fan of the ride, and we have many memories on that ride, this movie was fine, but there's a lot of story choices that you're making a movie based off this famous ride, and it's like if you don't follow certain stuff, it was just not going to be good for my score wise. It needed to follow certain things for me to be happy. The casting was good. The main cast, Emily Blunt, and The Rock, were really good, and there was interesting things about this movie, and there was a great villain, and there's some things I liked, but there's a lot of story choices I can't talk about unless we're talking about spoilers. So I'd have to give this a 6 out of 10. Just because of the main story. The main story.
So good.
Story decisions.
Yours is for you. It's good for
It's
me.
not good for me, but it's the main story decisions I can only talk about in spoilers that just made me mad. And when you make a movie about a ride, you should follow it based off the ride, and that's why it's that score. But you want to wrap it up?
Yep. So that was our non-spoiler review of Jungle Cruise. I gave it a 6.5. Kenny gave it a 6, and Barry gave it a 8 to 8.5 out of 10. Yeah, so if you want to hear our spoiler talk in the next section, stay tuned for that following this video. But if not, thanks for watching. Let us know in the comments what you think about Jungle Cruise.
We may make a spoiler session, I don't know.
If you've ridden the ride, let us know your favorite part of the ride. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.